Hello, you're listening to a sermon from Community Church in Prague, Oklahoma. At Community Church, we are all about loving God as a community and loving people in our community. If you live in the area, we would love for you to join us on a Sunday morning for coffee and fellowship at 9:30 or for service at 10 a.m. And now here's our pastor, Wopsle, with a special Christmas Eve sermon.
Welcome again. My name is Wopsle. If I don't know you, I'm the pastor around here. And man, I'm glad you've chosen to spend your Christmas Eve with us. I hope that this kind of adds to the greatness that Christmas Eve and tomorrow, Christmas Day, will be. Now, how about Christmas gifts? Has everyone raised your hand if you've already opened at least one Christmas gift this year? Have you had some kind of something? Okay, most of us, not all of us have, but some of us have. Hopefully, if you didn't raise your hand yet, you do have some more. And I didn't just point out the saddest part of your Christmas is that you didn't get any presents whatsoever. Have you ever, maybe this year or maybe in the past, have you ever opened a gift that was kind of challenging? What I mean by this is have you ever opened a gift that you kind of saw and you looked at it and you were like, yeah, I can use this and I need this, but I don't know. Let me give you an example. Maybe you're in that 10 to 11, 12, 13-year-old range, right? Somewhere in there, and you got deodorant for Christmas. And you're like, this isn't a toy. I can't do anything with this, right? I can't buy Robux with this. What should I do with deodorant? And you might say something like, why'd you guys get me this? I don't even use deodorant. And your family would say, exactly. Now you've arrived at the purpose for this present, right? Or maybe if I'm talking about getting in shape or something, you get me some workout equipment or a gym membership, that's great. But if I hadn't said anything and just out of the blue, you get me a membership to the gym, not cool. Okay, I'll do this on my time or I won't do it. Either way, this gift would be challenging and not a way. For me, I remember not too long ago, I wear an undershirt, like a white t-shirt underneath most of my clothes. A lot of guys kind of do that. And so I have this whole drawer that's just full of undershirts, right? And a couple Christmases ago, Amy got me a brand new pack of white undershirts, like a big pack of Hanes or something, white undershirts. And I was like, this is great. This is a great gift. I wear undershirts all the time. So yeah, I need more shirts, right? But then she added this. She said, now you can get rid of some of those old undershirts. And I'm like, no, if a requirement for me to receive this gift is for me to give up something of my old stuff, I'm not going to do it because sure, they're ratty. They got holes in them. They got stains everywhere that a shirt can have a stain. But a lot of guys, we have this connection to our t-shirts. We just love them. We take them out of the dryer, we hold them up and we're like, I'm going to wear you in a week. It's going to be a great day, right? This is my job interview undershirt that I'm going to wear. It's going to be so good. It's got a big hole right in the belly button. It's going to give me luck. That's me anyway. I have this. So I was so I didn't get rid of my old ones, but I did get the new ones. But sometimes we can get a gift that we need, that we want, that's going to help everything. But it's also kind of challenging because we're wait a minute. What is this gift really saying? Or what does this gift really mean? Hopefully you've gotten a gift like that because I think sometimes the Jesus coming and being the light of the world and inviting us into a relationship with him and into that light, I think sometimes it can be a challenging gift for many of us, if I'm being honest. I think sometimes we can find ourselves being yes, we know this is good news, but what does this good news mean to me? And that's going to be a little bit more challenging. That's where we're going to get. Let me give you a little recap as to kind of how I came about this sermon today, just for a few minutes, and then we'll get into it. So for this series for Good News, we've been going through one gospel each week, right? There's 4 Sundays we've done so far. There's 4 gospels. So we went Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, the first chapter of each one. But then we had tonight. There's not a 5th gospel. I wasn't really sure what to do. I didn't want to go back to a previous gospel. So my first thought was, well, let's just dig into John chapter 2. If you were here past Sunday, we did John chapter 1. So John chapter 2 would seem like a kind of good part. So first thing I did is I turned to John chapter 2, verse 1. And it's the story you probably know about Jesus going to a wedding, and they run out of wine at this wedding. And so Jesus turns a bunch of water into wine to keep the party going. And I was like, boy, that's an easy sermon to preach right there, right? It's fun. It's kind of funny. It's Jesus's first miracle. right? Running out of wine. Some of you have in-laws in town, so you know how big of a deal it would be if you ran out of wine. You know what I'm saying? Like, this would be an easy sermon to be fun and good, so we should preach that. But then I kept reading in the last half of John chapter 2 is this part where Jesus goes into the temple and makes a whip and starts whipping people because the religious leaders were doing all kinds of wrong stuff in the temple. And he was like he's like, get out of here, stop turning my house into a den of robbers, right? And so I was like, boo, it's funny to be talking about this sweet little baby Jesus. And then fast forward to Jesus just whipping fools in church, right? Like I was like, okay, that would be pretty cool. Or maybe this is a sermon. It's like the Jesus water into wine Jesus, and then the whipping Jesus, and these two different kind of Jesuses in the same John chapter 2. I was like, that could be a pretty fun sermon. So I thought about that sermon for a little bit, but I went ahead and turned the page and read in John chapter 3. It's one of my favorite stories in the whole Bible because there was a man named Nicodemus. And Nicodemus was kind of one of the Jewish religious leaders. Okay. He was like the Jewish people that ended up crucifying Jesus, or at least calling for his crucifixion at the end of his life. Nicodemus was the same part of that same group. And so, but Nicodemus, as he was studying the scriptures, he began to think, this Jesus guy might just be this Messiah. And so he reached out to Jesus and he had this one-on-one conversation in the middle of the night that nobody else knew, just between Jesus and Nicodemus. And I was like, boy, that's a Christmas sermon if I've ever heard it, right? A one-on-one in the still of the night, in the quietness, Nicodemus talking to Jesus face to face. That'd be great. That story even ends with John 3:16, which if I forget, something about God so loved the world, I forget, I'm not very familiar with it. But I was like, that would be a good Christmas sermon. But just to kind of make sure to be complete, I read a little bit more to John 3:19, and it starts with these words. It says, this is the verdict. See, what I had been really looking for is I wanted something that took all that we've been talking about, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, all that we've been studying this whole semester, to kind of wrap it up, put a little bow on it so that we can look at it and say, that's what the good news is. So when I read in John 3:19, when John says, this is the verdict, and then he tells us something, I'm like, oh, that's probably a pretty good place to wrap up what we've been talking about this whole time. So John 3:19, it says this. It says, this is the verdict. Light has come into the world. Now, this verdict definitely references just these few verses before, John 3:16 and all that kind of stuff. But I think it's also a conclusion to all the things John has talked about so far, right? He's saying this light has come into the world. This light has come to this small and quiet wedding. Light has come to the busy city of Jerusalem at Passover in the middle of these religious leaders totally missing the mark. Light has come in the middle of the night to this man who has simply had questions for Jesus. All of these things are parts where Jesus showing up changed and influenced those happenings. All right, think about this. Light has come to meet the very real needs that you and I have, and sometimes by miracles, if that's what it takes. Light has come, whether we like it or not, to convict, to correct, and to change the course of religious people, which is why I can be that sometimes, right? Or this light has come, Jesus has come to look us in the face and have a one-on-one conversation with us in the middle of our questions and doubts. This is the verdict out of all this stuff that John's been saying. Light has come into the world. And I think if we just end the sermon right there, we'd all feel pretty good, wouldn't we? It's a good verdict. Light has come. Let's pack it up. We all got presents to open, right? Let's go. But there is a little bit more to John 3:19, and I think the other part is the part that's kind of challenging. It's the challenging part of the gift. And it might even cause some friction in this if we'll allow it to. I think it would be for our good. You see, because there's more to John 3:19, and we only read the first half earlier. It's doing a disservice to the scriptures if we don't keep going. So this is what it says. John says, this is the verdict. Light has come into the world, but, and you got to know around here, I don't mean to be crass on Christmas Eve, but around here we say buts in the Bible are always a big deal, okay? You got to pay attention to the buts, because what it usually does is it sets up some premise or idea or says this is how things could or should be, and then there's this but, which is a hinge that everything turns, and it usually says, but instead this thing is true. One of the examples we like to point out is Romans 6:23 says, the wages of sin is death. If there was a period at the end of that sentence, we would all be in trouble, right? But instead it says, the wages of sin is death, but it's this hinge. Things look bad, but turn over here. The gift of God is eternal life through Jesus Christ our Lord. So the setup, oh no, things aren't going to go well, but God's given us this gift of Jesus. So a but in the Bible is usually saying this is some setup that you may think something, but it's actually going to go a different way. The Bible with this one is the setup is the good part, right? This is the verdict. Light has come into the world. Hallelujah. Praise God. But, but we swing over here. Something bad's going to happen instead. People loved darkness instead of light because their deeds were evil. It's interesting, isn't it, that John doesn't say people loved the dark because they think the dark is better than the light. He says they love the darkness because the darkness hides their deeds. So we're talking about this decision of how to live. It's not really a decision between living in the light or about light and darkness. That'd be easy. Even people that are up to no good don't think that darkness is actually better than light. I think everyone agrees light's better than darkness. But the difference is do we want to be in the light where everybody can see all of our deeds, or would we rather be in the darkness where we can do some things in secret? And yeah, sure, we all want to live in the light on Sundays, right? Or maybe around Christmas time when grandma's watching. But the rest of the year, there are many of us, sometimes me in my life, I don't want that light exposing me. I don't really want to live in the light all the time. Let's keep going to see what John says in the next verse 20. He says, everyone who does evil hates the light and will not come into the light for fear that their deeds will be exposed. That's what we just talked about, right? But, there's another but, whoever lives by the truth comes into the light so it may be seen plainly that what they have done has been done in the sight of God. So I guess here's what I'm trying to say here. What this points out is the two people we're talking that John's pointing out here, it's not those that do good and those that do bad. It's actually the same people. It's just those that do their things in the darkness and those that do their things in the light, good or bad. So if you're kind of feeling like I want to follow God and I want to live in the light the way that Jesus is coming, that means I have to stop doing bad things. That's not what John's saying at all. He's just saying, do you want to stay in the dark so the things that you do good and bad are hidden? Or do you want to step into the light where the things that you do, good or bad, everybody knows about? That's the decision that we're making. And I think this is the part that can be the challenging gift that is Jesus. It's going to help us out, but we're not quite sure that we really want it at first, right? It's like that deodorant. Like, yeah, maybe I need it, but it's making me consider some things about myself. So why do we need this light then? Well, so why do we want to be in the light? What about my deeds that aren't very becoming of me or don't line up with God's will for my life? Or the things that I've been trying to hide? Well, so why would I ever want to pull that into the light? I'm glad you asked because that's the next point in my sermon. It's because this. And if you didn't hear me say anything else this year, I think this is probably the most important thing I'm going to tell you. Exposed sin has no power. Exposed sin out in the light where everyone can see it has no power. Sin in the darkness, things that you are keeping hidden, it can have this power over you. It can make you harm relationships, or it can make you do things that you wouldn't normally do in order to keep it hidden. But when those things come out into the light, you don't have any motivation to lie or to hide or to be something that you're not anymore. You're just living in the light. Here I am, everyone, warts and all. You take me or leave me, but this is me. This is all that I am. Sin exposed is powerless to make you do the things that you don't want to do. And so this light has come in the form of Jesus. And that doesn't mean that you're never going to make a mistake again. And it doesn't mean that everything's always going to go your way, but it means when these things do come your way, that they don't have any power over you. They are rendered powerless by the light of Jesus. A couple pages over in John chapter 8, I want to remind you of a story. There's this woman who was caught in adultery, caught in the act of adultery is what our Bible says. And so some people pulled her and they threw her out into the town square. Right? What was hidden, what was secret, what nobody was supposed to know about has now been put on the ultimate display in the middle of town. And they said, Jesus, the law says that we're supposed to kill this woman where she stands. What do you say? What do you think we should do? You know the story. Jesus writes in the dirt for a little bit. He says, how about this? Whoever is without sin, cast the first stone. Well, one at a time, the people dropped their rocks and walked away to where it's just Jesus and this woman. And he asked her, he says, hey, where are all of your accusers? Where are all these people that were so dead set on murdering you in the middle of town? Where did they go? And she says, seems like they're all gone. And Jesus says, well, then I don't condemn you either. Now go and leave your life of sin. Now, just for a second, put yourself in the shoes of someone, maybe not an adulterer, but someone that has some secret that they've been hidden in the dark. And imagine that secret being picked and thrown into the light. You would be thinking, this is the worst thing that could happen. That must have been what this woman is thinking. This is going to be certain death whenever my deeds that I've been doing in the dark are out in the light. There is no way that this can end well. These deeds are meant to be hidden, and now they're out in the open. This isn't going to be good. And then guess what? It is for her good. Because those deeds, whenever they were opened up to the light, opened the door for God's grace and forgiveness to rush in. Whenever the gospel is preached, people tell the story of this woman because it's God's character on display, and she would have never been put in that position if her deeds that had been done in the dark didn't come out into the light. You see, so if you think, well, so why do I ever want my deeds out into the light? It's because there is a measure and display of God's grace in your life that can only be presented whenever all your stuff's out in the light. So put yourself in this. So this just happened, right? This was fresh on Jesus' mind, and the crowd, they had all heard it. So the very next verse after that story in verse 12, this is what it says, when Jesus spoke again to the people. So he's thinking about this woman whose deeds were in the dark, and now they're in the light. He's thinking about this forgiveness that he extended to her and the grace that was shown and what all the crowd saw. And this is, he says, I am the light of the world. And whoever follows me will never walk in darkness, but will have the light of life. So he's thinking about her. He's saying, whoever follows me, whoever comes after me, whoever allows themselves to, you won't have to be in darkness anymore. You can have the light of life. You can live, you can walk, you can be in the light all the time. And believe it or not, even if right now, this whole sermon, you've had that stuff in the dark that you're thinking about, believe it or not, it's better when it's in the light, when it's exposed. It has no power. And you may not believe me tonight. And that's okay. In fact, you may be here and you may say, Wopsle, I don't believe any of this stuff, man. You may say a virgin birth, come on. Where I come from, virgins don't have kids. So this doesn't make any sense. And if that's you, if you say, this book doesn't make sense to me, Wopsle, I can't fault you. There's a lot of stuff in here that takes a lot of big faith to believe. And if you don't, I don't think you're crazy. I'm glad you came to church. I'm glad you're here on Christmas Eve. I hope you'll continue in the next year to investigate what it might mean for you. But if you don't believe any of this, I get it. But what I don't get is there's so many people that I talk to that do believe this, that believe that Mary conceived a baby when she was a virgin, gave birth to the Son of God. They believe that Son of God grew up, died for sins, and rose again. They believe that there was a flood. They believe that Jesus stood in front of this woman who was about to get stoned and protected her. They believe all of these stories in this Bible right up until the point that they get to them. And for some reason, people think, I believe in this, but I don't believe that those same promises extend to me. I believe in God's goodness for them, but I have a harder time believing God's goodness for me. Yeah, I believe, also that story you just told about the woman, that it was better for her sins to be out in the light, but I don't think that's true for me. There's another woman at the well when Jesus talked to her. She went and told her friends, she said, come and see a guy who told me everything I've ever done. He pointed out everything that I've ever done, and she's proud of it. She's like, he put everything out there in the light. He showed me exactly what's going on, right? This is the woman where he says, bring me your husband. And she says, I don't have a husband. He says, that's right. He's actually been married 5 times. And you're living with a guy now that's not. And she's like, ooh, kind of rough, right? She's like, hey, everybody, this guy knows everything about me. Like, she was so thrilled to have everything out in the light. You can say yes, it's good for her, Wopsle, but it wouldn't be good for me. Yes, God had a plan for Mary and stuck with her, but I don't think he's got a plan for me. Or yes, I believe that God, his forgiveness extends to other people, but you don't know what I've done, Wopsle. I'm not as good, and I can't be as good as those people in my Bible. If you believe any of the words of this book, I hope that you'll believe and remember today that the promises that are for the other people in this book are also the promises for us. and that the goodness that we see of God toward his children in these pages is the same goodness that God shows us. And if the people in this book are better whenever their lives are brought out into the light and they have to face up and deal with the stuff, then even though it may seem hard, your life is better when everything's brought out into the light and it's all out in the open and you've got to deal with it. It may be tough and it may be challenging, but if it's better for them, then it's better for you. It's better for me, because the promises, the pathways that this book lines out, they don't stop right before they get to you. They're not for everybody else. They're for you too.